Thank you, Andre, and the Chicago branch for sponsoring this series. 7 is an important number when it comes to the Book of Revelation. So I think that in itself is something to deepen our understanding of numbers, where we learn to enter into the qualitative aspect of numbers as opposed to the quantitative. The Pythagorean approach was more focused on that. And the Book of Revelation, obviously the number 7 reoccurs on many levels. So that's just something we should sort of deepen our understanding, that 7 is the number that relates to time, the cyclical development of time, and obviously human evolution. If you look into the Waldorf school approach and Steiner's study of the human biography, that you have a 7-year rhythm that plays an important role in the educational approach. And the number 12, which occurs in the Book of Revelation and the later part especially, is more related to the world of space, like the zodiac. So I wanted to start by just taking a moment to remember that we're approaching the 100th anniversary of Rudolf Steiner's death. We've had many important anniversaries recently, whether it was the burning of the Goetheanum, 2022, leading over to 2023, and then you had the next year, the foundation stone meeting. And now we have the death day on the 30th of March, a little after, between Easter and Pentecost. And the sculptural group that I'm showing on this slide has obviously a deep significance for our theme. This particular picture I'm noticing doesn't include the bottom section where Ahriman is hiding below. But anyways, the Goetheanum, the first Goetheanum, is, I think, a very significant legacy of Rudolf Steiner. And sadly, it wasn't able to reach the point of its inauguration. This sculpture was never installed, which is the reason that we still have it with us these days. So there's always sort of mixed blessings. Here I wanted to go a little bit into the working with the 7 seals that I've been introducing throughout these presentations. And I've mentioned before that I've found it helpful to work with them meditatively in connection with days of the week. And so I'm just enumerating here which ones belong then to the 7 days of the week, so that one can work with this as a rhythm that one repeats. And this is from Rudolf Steiner's lecture series. It's 4 lectures, Occult Signs and Symbols, where he says you can see how the whole world presents itself in such seals. And because the magi and initiates have put the whole cosmos into them, they contain a mighty force. You can continually turn back to these seals, and you will find that by meditating on them, they will disclose infinite wisdom. They can have a mighty influence on the soul because they have been created out of cosmic secrets. Hang them in a room where such things are discussed, as we have been doing here. Discussions in which one raises oneself to the holy mysteries of the world, and they will prove enlivening and illuminating in the highest degree.
Dear Florian, we still have very first slide on the screen.
Okay.
Just letting you know. So, this is second.
That was the second one I was
This
thinking
is
you were seeing, but I guess not.
no, well, but we know representative of humanity figure. So, but now you are, looks like you're reading number 3, right? Or no?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, we're good now. Thank you.
So these 7 seals, Steiner also referred to them as the Rosicrucian seals. And they appeared in the Malsch Bau, which we'll see in just a minute. But working with them in relation to the days of the week, I think is an appropriate rhythm. The days of the week relate to the evolutionary sequence. It comes to expression in Saturday having to do with Saturn, Sunday with the sun evolution, moon with Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday actually are related, I believe, to the 2 halves of Earth evolution. And then you have Thursday and Friday, which are then related to the latter Vulcan stage, you could say, or a Venus Vulcan stage. And by repeating this as a meditative rhythm, one can deepen one's understanding and begin to awaken the imaginations that they are meant to convey. And the way I've been working with them is in between these meditational working with them. I've also been working with what Rudolf Steiner had to say about these, as well as Rudolf Steiner's contributions in lectures and writings to the Book of Revelation, which they're closely related to. And then, of course, also the Book of Revelation itself, the last book in the Bible. And one could say that that book is sealed with 7 seals. It is not something that's accessible to ordinary consciousness. And that becomes apparent right from the beginning, where we have this figure appearing whose eyes are like coals of fire, who's got a fiery sword emanating from his mouth. He has the 7 stars in his right hand. He has a white garment down to his feet, and his feet are like brazen brass. They're like fiery as well. And his countenance is sun-like, so that this obviously doesn't relate to the physical human being, but rather the soul spiritual dimension that the Christ in his glory, after having overcome death, he's referred in those early chapters as the Alpha and the Omega, the first begotten of the dead. So one can also zero in on the different symbolic aspects of the two-edged sword. Or he has a golden girdle. Gold relates to the sun mysteries. Or the seven stars, which has to do with the cyclical development. If one looks closely at the seven stars, they have the symbols for old Saturn, old sun, old moon, etc., so that the sequence of the planetary development is expressed there, that the Christ as the solar logos rules over this evolutionary sequence. So each of them one can deepen in this kind of way, and there are, of course, different versions. This is one of the ones that related to what was hanging in the Munich Congress in 1907, when Steiner first introduced them. Aside from what I quoted here in this Occult Signs and Symbols lectures, after this, he goes on to say that if you have these seals hanging in a room and you just chit chat and talk in ways that are not worthy of what they represent, then they can actually make you sick. So just as a cautionary note that he gave at that time. Here's some of the publications that Rudolf Steiner gave in terms of lectures on the Book of Revelation or in writings. I don't have all of them here, but in Christianity as a Mystical Fact, which is a written work, it has one chapter devoted to the Book of Revelation. That's one of his earliest contributions. There is a book, like in German, there's a series of lectures that aren't included, that are not available in English. Let me just read that one for a minute here. In it, this is GA number 90B. And in it, he gives lectures in, just find those here, called Theosophy, Christology, and Mythology. And in it, he gives the Apocalypse and Theosophical Cosmology. The first of those lectures was in Berlin, January 1905. And he gives another one on February 6th on the same theme, February 13th. These are all in Berlin, and February 20th, February 27th, March 6th. So he gave, 6 lectures on the Book of Revelation back then, and they don't happen to be available in English yet. So there's a tremendous amount in German also from other authors that's not available in English. So that for those who speak in German or can read German, that's another resource. This same volume has several others besides what I just mentioned that were given in Cologne, January 16th, 1905. Then another one in March 19th, 1905. And I believe there's still some further ones in here. And there's another volume that's related to this. I'm not going to go into it, that also has some, but not to the same extent. There's a course called the Paris Lectures that Edouard Chouret recorded. The last of those lectures, which are given in Paris, it's called Cosmology, I believe, is on the Book of Revelation. And he does there talk about these seals. These are just some by authors of the Christian community or anthroposophical authors. An important work is that by Emil Bach. Heidenreich was also one of the early founders of the Christian community. And then Friedrich Benisch. This one at the top is a Waldorf teacher. And then there is this one on the seven seals that is by Adrian Anderson. The other one is by Charles Kovacs, the Waldorf teacher. Adrian Anderson, I believe is from Australia, has written on many subjects. This is just one of them. He's one of the few authors who did work on the Grail triptych. He's also done books on the seasons from both the Southern Hemisphere and Northern Hemisphere. So there's some disagreements between Christian community and some who have approached it from a scientific vantage point as to how to celebrate the festivals down under. So as I say, there's many text available in German that I haven't included here. And this is the model Malsch Bau. It was built in such a way that the arc walls that one sees there have the pillars on top of it. If it was a full-size building, those would be sitting on the ground. But it was a small building, and this made it possible to enter in. And Rudolf Steiner laid the foundation stone and gave an important verse with it. And he says this is the first Rosicrucian temple to be situated on the earth. Previously, one needed to come into contact with Rosicrucian initiate in order to be led into the mystery temple, which was on the astral plane. So here Steiner helped to bring these Rosicrucian mysteries into the public view by introducing them at the Munich Congress. Aside from the imaginative element, which is related to the seven seals, not so much these seals that we just looked at, which encompass the whole book of Revelation, but the seven seals which follow the seven letters in the actual apocalypse text, so that they relate to the next great sixth epoch, which has then 7 ages, which relate to the 7 seals. Whereas in the sort of classical way that Steiner interpreted this in his 1908 lectures, he then related the 7 letters to the 7 ages of our post-Atlantean epoch. And so that we're in the 5th of those, which relates to the letter to the Church of Sardis. And we're looking forward to the future age, which is the age of Aquarius, where the Church of Philadelphia comes to the fore, the age of brotherhood. It's a Sophian age, as I've tried to point out in recent lectures on the Sophia theme. But after the 7 seals, which relate to the 6th great epoch, there's the 7th epoch of the earth, which is then the last epoch that also has 7 cultural ages. And those are related in the way that Steiner interpreted the book of Revelation in his Nuremberg cycle, relates to the 7 trumpets. So when you look at the Malsch Bau, you have on the one hand the 7 seals, which are repeated on both sides, but you also then have the 7 pillars that are repeated on both sides that have each a unique and distinct capital. And this world of form is related to the world of the harmony of the spheres, the world of tone, ether especially, and the 7 trumpets are related then to these 7 ages of the 7th epoch, which then culminate in the 7th trumpet, which is the last of the trumpets, and that leads over to a pralaya period, which is sort of the equivalent of the hierarchies going through a kind of death period, where just like we, after death, go backwards over our life, they go backwards over the earth evolution. And then after that great pralaya, the new evolutionary, the Jupiter stage, the New Jerusalem will emerge. So these forms, which in the Malsch Bau were also present, relate to the world of sound. And these two should complement each other. The world of imagination, which is the astral world revealing itself to us, and then this world of tones, the deviconic realm, the lower and higher devicon, the lower and higher heavenly world. So after death, when we have gone through the Kamaloka period, which in esoteric terms relates to what's called purgatory, that lasts as long as you spent in the sleep state, approximately in your last earthly life, which is about 1/3 of the time you spent on the earthly plane. And then one moves through the moon gate into the lower heavenly, the lower deviconic sphere. And there you relate to the hierarchies and can unfold the immortal fruits if one has in fact ripened immortal fruits during one's earthly life. And if one has more to give, then one passes through the sun gate into the higher devicon that leads on eventually to the zodiac, where the highest hierarchies, the seraphim and thrones, are active. So the future that is depicted in the book of Revelation really is telling us that this future is already present on the astral plane. And what's shared in the trumpets is already present on this lower, sort of this lower and higher Devachan plane. So that the future is already there. That's why in the past I've spoken of two main currents of time, one that comes from the past and leads over into the present. That's more the physical etheric stream of time. And then we have the other stream that comes out of the future, out of the astral world and higher Devachan. So this graphic tries to sort of show those major stages of the Earth evolution and how they're related to the book of Revelation. So this, of course, doesn't go back beyond the Earth, which would be old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, and then the Earth being the fourth stage in that great planetary cycle. But when the beginning of the Earth started, there was a recapitulation of the old Saturn, and that's called the Polarian, a recapitulation of the old Sun, called the Hyperborean, and then a recapitulation of the old Moon stage in the Lemurian. And this all has something to do, of course, with the first Earth stage, the Atlantean, because humanity prepared its astral body on the old Moon, its etheric body on the old Sun, its physical body goes back to old Saturn. So the physical is now in its fourth stage, the etheric in its third stage, and the astral in its second stage. And the ego, which is given on the earth, is in its very first stage. So it's the baby. And yet, without developing that ego in such a way that we can transform the astral into manas, the etheric into buddhi, the physical into atman, then we won't have the future that Christ prepared to look forward to. So that turning point of time is pivotal. And at present, when a human being dies, their etheric body, usually for a period of 3.5 days and nights, is expanding into the cosmic etheric world, and our memories kind of dissipate with it. We have a kind of a panorama of our earthly life. And then we go on to the astral stage where we go backwards over our life. Only now we experience how we impacted other people. We experience the pain we caused them, the joy we caused them, etc. And in the future, when human beings reach the stage of what's called the seven seals, we would have the beginning of what will only come about in the future Venus stage, which is the transformation of the etheric. The future Jupiter involves the transformation of the astral into manas, into spirit self. That's the purified astral. When we purify the astral to a certain extent, then the Sophia being, the world soul, can incorporate in us, and she's the source of cosmic wisdom. And she in turn gives birth to the Christ being. And this cosmic Sophia overlighted the Maria Sophia. And of course, that's more complicated than one would usually think, because we speak of two Marys, just like we speak of two Jesus children. But that will take us too far afield So let me then go on to these 7 ages that have to do with our 5th post-Atlantean period. And in the book of Revelation, according to Steiner, is related to the 7 letters to the 7 churches. And we're in what's called here the European, the present, 1413 to 3574. And then the Philadelphia, called the Russian Slavic, 3574 to 5734. And then we have what's called the Laodicea, the American, the last of the ages of our epoch. And because our 5th epoch is beyond the middle of Earth evolution, the middle of Earth evolution was the Atlantean period, the 4th epoch of the Earth, after which we then have been recapitulating those stages, the Polarian in the ancient Indian, the Hyperborean in the Persian, the Lemurian in the Egypto-Chaldean, and the Greco-Latin recapitulates the Atlantean stage. So now we're in the 5th age of Sardis. We're no longer recapitulating. We're anticipating the future. And Steiner indicates that's what makes our time particularly apocalyptic. And what is it that we're anticipating? We're anticipating that future transition from Earth to the Jupiter condition. And between our Earth and that, there is that pralaya period I spoke of earlier. And when we speak, for example, of the war in heaven between the 1840s and 1879, where the dragon is cast down onto the earth. This is according to what Steiner gave in the priest lecture, related to the 6th trumpet. So we kind of have telescoped into our time this distant future event of the transition from Earth to the New Jerusalem that the 6th trumpet represents in the larger cycle, kind of telescoped into our time, where all of humanity has been crossing the threshold. And this involves a division of humanity, a very crucial event where some souls are rising up by taking up the Christ impulse, others who have neglected to embrace that impulse, which is what allows us to rise up from the earthly and transform the astral, etc. By rejecting that and turning instead to materialism. A large part of humanity is coming under the spell of the Ahrimanic dragon forces that Michael puts beneath his feet. And then, of course, Steiner speaks of the 7th trumpet. The 6th, he said, started to sound in the 1840s. This is in the priest cycle. He says it's a consciousness soul interpretation he's giving at that time. And then the 7th trumpet would begin to sound at the turn of the millennium, which would be the year 2000. And that brings forward the imagination of the woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars and clothed with the sun, which is at the very heart of the book of Revelation in the 12th chapter. And there's, of course, the dragon that comes forward with 7 heads and 10 horns, who wants to devour the child, and the child is taken up unto the throne. So that precious gift is protected. And Michael then, as a defender of Sophia, comes forward and casts down the dragon, which was reflected between 1840 and 1879. So each of these ages lasts 2,160 years, and we generally incarnate roughly two times, once as a man, once as a woman in these periods. Some Ahriman seeks to accelerate evolution, and that often leads to people entering without the needed maturity to come to grips with their incarnation. But these two male and female incarnations are counted as one because they're meant to balance each other out. Now, certain souls have a mission that would allow them with spiritual guidance to incarnate numerous times as a male or numerous times as a woman. And those are, of course, the exception. But that nevertheless takes place, and Steiner speaks of that can only reach up to 7 times that one-sidedness can occur. So we look here at the end of the American age, which Steiner and the book of Revelation says is lukewarm. It won't provide any significant impulse. In fact, it will lead to this war of all against all. And the age of Philadelphia, the 6th age, is where the ripe fruit will develop that will then lead over into the new spiritual impulse in the 6th great epoch, where there will be a division of humanity into a good and evil part of humanity. And that is the time when the mark of the beast will appear on human countenances, where people will no longer be determined by heredity, but the good or evil in their soul will manifest in their physiognomy, in their outer form. And so this is then a time where those human beings who have taken up the Christ impulse will need to embrace the Manichaean impulse, which comes to the fore during that period, and that will have to do with working to redeem those souls, to help those souls who have succumbed to the influence of the adversarial forces, which will grow ever stronger. And it's things like racism, materialism that need to be overcome. Later, we have the whore of Babylon who rides on the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. So that's kind of representing that fallen humanity that you could say this city encompasses the whole earth, just like the preparation for the New Jerusalem, which is active in the etheric world with the second coming of Christ, giving the earth kind of a golden aura. There is also the subnature aura, and I've tried to show how our thinking especially can be raising us either into this realm of the Michaelic world of thinking, the Michael being the countenance of Christ, or we can succumb to the Luciferic Ahrimanic influence, which tend to feed into each other. Lucifer tends to have us more escape from the earth, whether it's through asceticism, through old methods that are no longer appropriate, of denying the significance of the earth. And then, of course, drugs and the like. There's many escapist routes. And then, of course, Ahriman is embodied in modern science that denies the spirit. And in the first half of Earth evolution, the Luciferic was dominant. In the second half, it's the Ahrimanic forces that are dominant. So they will grow ever stronger, and they're the great danger in our time. And in order to harmonize with the hierarchies, we need to anticipate that human beings will have to leave the physical plane. And under ideal conditions, that will actually happen during the Philadelphia period, around 5700 AD. And this impulse towards that will be led by the Slavic Russian peoples to make that end of that period their last physical incarnations. And with the help of the Christ being, they will develop an etheric body that can become then their lowest member. And they will then live in the periphery of the earth, in the weather, in the lightning, in the thunder, in the clouds, and influence the earth from beyond. But there will, from this more American Ahrimanic side, be endeavors to perpetuate physical incarnation. And I've tried to show in other presentations how transhumanism and posthumanisms are kind of a preparation for that. So the Lemurian race was destroyed by fire, the Atlantean by water. Ours will be destroyed by the war of all against all. Evil, through the struggle of men with one another, humanity will destroy itself in mutual strife. And the despairing thing, more desperately tragic than other catastrophes, will be that the blame will lie with the human beings themselves. And Steiner goes on to say that a tiny handful of men will save themselves and pass over into the sixth epoch. This tiny handful will have developed complete selflessness. The others will make use of every imaginable skill and subtlety in the penetration and conquest of the physical forces of nature, but without attaining the essential degree of selflessness, they will start the war of all against all, and that will be the cause of the destruction of our civilization. In another, as he then says, in the seventh post-Atlantean cultural epoch, to be precise, this war of all against all will break out in the most terrible way. Great and mighty forces will ensue from discoveries that will turn the entire Earth globe into a kind of self-functioning electrical apparatus. The tiny handful will be protected in a way that cannot be discussed. That was back in 1904. This was in the lecture series on the temple legend, where he shared a lot of other very important things. Now, he says, in regards to this war of all against all, at the end of the seventh cultural age, it is impossible to conceive what might happen in such circumstances if mankind has not by then reached selflessness. The attainment of selflessness alone will enable humanity to be kept from the brink of destruction. The downfall of our present epoch will be caused by a lack of morality. The Lemurian was destroyed by fire, the Atlantean by water. Our epoch and its civilization will be destroyed by the war of all against all, by evil. Human beings will destroy each other in mutual strife. And the terrible thing, more desperately tragic than other catastrophes, believe that he said that before. So let me not repeat that. So this is the seventh seal, the last of those Rosicrucian seals. I've dealt with this before, and at the bottom you have the cube, water. Steiner speaks of, one can imagine it as filled with water, but it's really the prima materia, the virginal water of the earth, where the Father God, then the ex Deo Massimor, is then the source of vibrations in that water that cause materialization to begin to occur. And there are then serpents that are involved. This means that this could only be accomplished together with the Luciferic beings who were opposed to Yahweh, for example. And without them, this three-dimensional space could not arise. And I also have shown that that three-dimensional space, that cube, was the shape of the Holy of Holies in the Temple of Solomon, and that a natural crystallizing of salt forms a cube. And in the trichotomy of the alchemists, you had salt, mercury, sulfur. This is pretty much the same as what Rudolf Steiner later articulated in the threefold human being. Salt related to the thinking and the nerve sense pole centered in the head. The rhythmic system related to mercury, the alchemical mercury related to the breathing and the heartbeat and the feeling life. And then you have the metabolic limb system in the sulfur that would relate to the combustive forces of the metabolism. And in Solomon's temple, the two pillars at the entry to the temple were related to the will. In the middle room of the temple, you had the altar of incense, you had the 12 showbread, and that incense rising up is really the prayers, the offerings that are rising up. You had the 7-branch candelabra relating to the planets, the 12 showbread to the zodiac, and they still saw divinity behind those spheres. So they were making offerings. And only the high priest was allowed to enter the Holy of Holies. It was covered with a curtain with 4 colors that relate to the 4 elements of earth, air, water, fire. And inside of that Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant. The whole room was gilded in gold. And above that Ark of Covenant, where the presence of Yahweh was sought, these cherubim with wings spanning that whole room hovered. And these really represent spirit self, life spirit, spirit man, these 3 aspects of the human being represented by the golden triangle that Christ gave to humanity. But the salt element is related to the head of the temple. And it's that head of the temple that metamorphoses into the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem, as you might recall, also has the measurements of a cube. And it's the future sun earth. So just like we have the gold in that hidden room, which was hidden in darkness as a secret of the future, and at the mystery of Golgotha, while it was underway, great earthquakes caused that veil that led into the Holy of Holies to be rent in twain, to be torn open. So the secret of what's hidden in that Holy of Holies was revealed through the mystery of Golgotha. And to make it more publicly accessible, Christ then didn't come just to initiates like the high priest who could enter that room, but came for the whole of humanity. And when the blood flowed into the earth and penetrated the earth, the solar logos, the sun spirit, the 7 Elohim, the body of Jesus, which had been prepared through Yahweh, and the 6th Son Elohim that entered at the baptism, united themselves with the earth. And since then, the earth has gained a new aura. The earth is shining with the prefiguration of the New Jerusalem of the future. And the Goetheanum was meant to represent the same impulse. I've spoken of that before. And one can unfold this cube on the bottom right there into a cross. And most of the cathedrals were in the shape of the cross, including the Goetheanum itself. And so the in Christo Murimur that's in the seventh center of this seal has to do with the Christ impulse redeeming those Luciferic serpents. So you have the breath emanating from those serpents, creating a kind of upward spiral that leads over to the Holy Spirit. So the metamorphosis of this redemption of Lucifer brought about by Christ led to the fiery tongues that arose at Pentecost, 50 days after Easter. And the Maria Sophia can be imagined in the middle of that circle. And that's where the new language of that overcomes the Tower of Babel, where the confusion of tongues led to the downfall of humanity, losing its original primal language. And so we need to regain that so that we can speak to the stars. Right now, we're on the way to that with the help of anthroposophy. So Steiner spoke of, for him who has this point of view, it becomes comprehensible. This earth, this ensouled earth organism shows itself outwardly, otherwise in its eastern half, otherwise in its western. In the east, it has its blue covering. In the west, something like a glowing out of its interior, hence the reddish burning glow. But other differentiations come in. If the soul of one who has died contemplates certain points in our present age, especially souls who have died in the sense of in Christo Murimur, then he perceives at the place that is designated here as Palestine, as Jerusalem, out of the bluish violet, something of a golden form, a golden crystal form, which comes to life. That is Jerusalem seen from the spirit. That is what also plays a part in the apocalypse, insofar as I speak of imaginations as heavenly Jerusalem. These are not things which are thought out. These are things which can be seen, contemplated from the spirit. The mystery of Golgotha was as it is in physical observation when the astronomer directs his telescope into cosmic space and then sees something that amazes him, for example, the appearance of a new star. Spiritually observed from the cosmos, the event of Golgotha was the appearance of a golden star in the blue earth aura of the eastern half of the earth. Here you have the imagination for what I described in conclusion the day before yesterday. It is really important that through such imaginations, conceptions of the universe are acquired, which enable the human soul to find its place within the spirit of the cosmos. So you have, according to the picture that Steiner developed before this, as seen from the dead or a clairvoyant, this eastern half of the earth appears in a blue violet. And it's on that eastern half that the world of the stars, the heavenly world, is reflected on the earth and mirrored back. And the deeper aspect of the Russian and Slavic folk soul loves the earth because it witnesses that reflection. And that will help those people who really live into that mission to fulfill the task of helping to build the future New Jerusalem. Now, on the other side of the earth, where America is, there one has a bright red, fiery red burning through the crust of the earth, accompanied by subnature forces from the interior of the earth, affecting the population. And in the middle, in Europe, in between, you have a kind of greenish aura. And you could say, if you use the color circle that Goethe helped to develop here in the Pacific, which would be opposite the green of Europe, you would have the peach blossom color, which is the color of the etheric. So I brought this numerous times before, but I want to just show here that the upturned pointed star, which is often there at the top of the Christmas tree, and if you stand in that position, you can experience the configuration of the etheric body. And Steiner indicated that this etheric body, when you put a pentagram around it and a circle around that pentagram, you can relate the circle to the ego, the pentagram or the pentagon around the pentagram to the astral, that large pentagram to the etheric, and the upside down turned pentagon is really related to the physical. And that's where we need the Christ in the human heart in order to avoid the reversal of the star. So you could inscribe an inverted star in that middle upturned pentagram, the pentagon that's turned downward, and you would have an inverted pentagram. And this is where Steiner indicated that the washing of the feet, the ritual that Christ did, protected against the Ahrimanic forces which attack from below, from the interior of the earth, through the feet. And Ahriman, if he succeeds, can then take hold of the human being, rising up as high as the sexual. And if the Christ isn't there in the human heart, he can pull down the Luciferic forces in the head to serve the lower nature. And that leads to this inverted star at the bottom here. And the stage is prepared for us to come under those influences by the fact that certain archai beings who were in their human stage in old Saturn remain behind. Certain archangels remain behind on the old sun stage when they were going through their human stage. And certain angels remain behind on the old moon when they were moving from their human to their angelic phase. And as a result, we have azuric beings, the backward spirits from old Saturn, Ahriman, which is the backward forces that remain behind on the old sun, and then the Luciferic forces that remain behind on the old moon. Now, as I pointed out earlier, the Luciferic forces can be more readily redeemed. The Ahrimanic resist redemption at this particular time. But we need the Michael's help. We need the Sophia's help to redeem Lucifer, to purify the soul. We need Michael to put the dragon beneath our feet. The Azuric beings oppose the Father God, Ahrimanic beings the Son God, the Luciferic beings the Holy Spirit. That 666, the sun demon, is really the Antichrist. And this being has a 666 rhythm on the earth, but it also plays a huge role in the future as we approach the number 666 more in these different evolutionary periods. So you could say currently there are two great cities, which are the preparations for the future New Jerusalem. This has to do with the fact that the whole earth is becoming one great city through the help of the internet, through the help of the World Wide Web, through the help of the global economy. That all helps to create the great city of Babylon, which is nurtured and made possible by subnature forces. Electricity, magnetism, nuclear energy. These are all death forces. we can get help to build the germinal New Jerusalem through getting in touch with the levity forces. All these subnature forces are subject to gravity. Electricity is decaying light, magnetism is fallen, sound, tone ether, and lower devicon. Electricity is fallen astral world, and the azuric beings have to do with the fallen life ether and also the higher deviconic forces. So they oppose the Father. But by renewing our relationship to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, through those beings who are closest to us, the angels, the archangels, the archai who haven't fallen, they represent our future. We are destined to reach an angelic phase in the New Jerusalem. Spirit self is that. This means unfolding the mission of transforming the earth into a planet of love. And we are destined to, or called to, become archangels during the Venus stage and archai during the Vulcan stage. So these hierarchies, the third hierarchy that's closest to us, they represent the Holy Spirit aspect, the divine thinking. That's what's in the foreground in our time. So we have the opportunity to rise up towards the New Jerusalem or sink into the eighth sphere, which is counter-evolutionary development that the Luciferic and Ahrimanic forces are seeking to bring about. So in the priest course, Steiner indicated the New Jerusalem descends from above. The old Jerusalem was built from below upwards. Now the New Jerusalem will be built in all reality from above downward. The building of the old Jerusalem will be transformed into the spiritual building of the New Jerusalem, which will be built from above downwards. This involves integrating the levity forces, which work from the etheric formative forces, which come to expression in the various life rhythms, which can be celebrated through the festivals. Quote, for the Christ will in the encircling round hold sway in the rhythm of the worlds, blessing the soul. That's taken from the middle verse of the Foundation Stone meditation, which is a very significant meditation for helping to build the future New Jerusalem. So the plant kingdom is a visible manifestation of the etheric and embodies these levity forces. It's the reverse of the human being. It gives us the gift of oxygen. It teaches us about the Holy Grail with its blossom, with its selfless love. The blossom is the sexual organ of the plant. So the Rosicrucians saw that as a symbol of the future procreation that human beings will be called to in the future when they no longer inhabit the physical earth in the way that we do now. So Michael is really the countenance of the Christ being. And he is the leading archangel of our time, and he is also on a path to becoming the new archai. So his influence encompasses the entire earth. Michael meets man with a very clear gesture of repulsion for many things. For example, all knowledge tending to lay stress on inherited characteristics, repelling it, driving it away with depreciation. That means everything having to do with the hereditary impulse being made important. So it is with Michael. He also sternly rejects all separating elements, such as the human languages. So long as we only clothe our knowledge in these languages and do not carry it right up into the thoughts, we cannot come near Michael. So we have to raise thoughts into living thoughts, into imaginations. Among the things that would fain reject the impulse of Michael today are the feelings of nationality. They flared up in the 19th century and became strong in the 20th. That was really during the Gabriel age, the lunar archangel who ruled from around the 15th century, 14th, 15th century, became strong in the 20th century, stronger and stronger. By the principles of nationality, many things have been ordered, or rather have become sadly disordered in the most recent times. All this is in terrible opposition to the Michael principle. All this contains Ahrimanic forces which strive against the inpouring of the Michael force into the earthly life of man. So then we see this battle of the upward attacking Ahrimanic spirits who would like to carry upward what comes through the inherited impulse of nationality, with Michael sternly rejecting and repelling it. So this is taken from one of Steiner's lectures on Rosicrucianism and modern initiation, given in 1924, The Tasks of the Michael Age. So engaging the battle with the dragon, the whole Michael tradition must be renewed. Michael with his feet upon the dragon. It is right to contemplate this picture which portrays Michael, the warrior, defending the cosmic spirit against the Michael powers under his feet. This battle, more than any other, is laid in the human heart. There within the hearts of men it is and has been waged since the last third of the 19th century. Decisive indeed will be what human hearts do with this Michael impulse in the world in the course of the 20th century, and in the course of the 20th century, when the first century after the end of the Kali Yuga has elapsed. Humanity either will stand at the grave of all civilization or at the beginning of that age when the souls of men, who in their hearts ally intelligence with spirituality, Michael's battle will be fought out to victory. So we've just passed through that end of this 20th century. And one can ask, where are we? At the beginning of a Michael age or the beginning of the grave of civilization? However, here present-day human beings must look at the rise of Michael in the 70s of the last century. This is from something Rudolf Steiner gave at the end of the 8th lecture in the priest culture or priest course on the apocalypse. However, here present-day human beings must look at the rise of Michael in the 70s of the last century, at the appearance of Christ in the first half of the 20th century, and at the threatening rise of Zorat and the Zorathians at the end of the 20th century. Let us arrange our lives in accordance with these three mysteries of our time: the Michael mystery, the Christ mystery, and the Zorat mystery, as understanding human beings who know how to interpret the signs of our time, and we will be able to work in the right way. So all of this is leading to the incarnation of Ahriman. And one can ask, how is that being prepared? It's being prepared through the intervention of Zorat in 1998. That's the third 33-year rhythm. It was being prepared through the coming of the beast in 1933 that Rudolf Steiner predicted in that same Priester course, where he said before human beings could encounter the Christ in the etheric, which he predicted would begin in around 1933, they must meet the beast of the apocalypse. This is the beast whose number is 666. And that beast, you could say, worked through the being of Hitler. So the Hakenkreuz that was used by the Nazis is also a symbol of the root chakra. So when you're initiated from above, from the crown, that's an initiation that addresses human freedom in our time. The old Indian evolution worked with the Kundalini, raising it from below, but they had a guru that had the authority over the neophyte, over the student. But Hitler was initiated from below through that root chakra in a violent way, in a way that took possession of him. And through him then spoke Zorat as one of the beings who was possessed by him. But Steiner predicted that from 1998 onward, more and more human beings would be possessed by these Zorat impulses. And one of the things he spoke of is egoless beings that would arise more and more in this period ahead. These are beings who don't have a human ego, and they do have a physical, etheric, astral body, and they can only develop up to around the 20th year and not beyond. And that we know in the book of Revelation, they're mentioned, and we know that these beings appear in large numbers and eat all of the green things. So they tend to take up this Ahrimanic impulse and work against the life processes of the earth, etc. So we're in a critical time where we're facing these forces, and the incarnation of Ahriman, which is meant to take place in this period we've entered, is sort of an imminent thing that human beings will have to face. And this is Rudolf Steiner's very last words that he chose to speak to the members of the Anthroposophical in his last letter to the members. By far the greater part of that which works in modern civilization through technical science and industry, wherein the life of man is so strongly interwoven, is not nature at all, but subnature. It is a world which emancipates itself from nature, emancipates itself in a downward direction. Entering the purely earthly element, he strikes upon the Ahrimanic realm. With his own being, he must now acquire a right relationship to the Ahrimanic. But in the age of technological science, hitherto, the possibility of finding a true relation to the Ahrimanic civilization has escaped man. He must find the strength, the inner force of knowledge, in order not to be overcome by Ahriman in this technical civilization. He must understand subnature for what it really is. This he can only do if he rises in spiritual knowledge, at least as far into extra-earthly supernature as he has descended in technical science into subnature. The age requires a knowledge transcending nature, because in its inner life, it must come to grips with a life content which is sunk far beneath nature, a life content whose influence is perilous. Electricity, for instance, celebrated since the discovery as the very soul of nature's existence, must be recognized in its true character, in its peculiar power of leading down from nature to subnature. Only man must beware lest he slide downward with it. It's important to take these things that Rudolf Steiner said about the subnature forces extremely seriously. There are anthroposophists who downplay that danger of electricity and make it sound like it's all neutral and it's just how we use it. But that's not what Steiner indicated. So we need to take these things very seriously and realize that these forces are particularly strong in certain parts of the globe. So this is kind of a map that overlays the etheric geography. And you can see that the life ether forces, which are connected with the physical mineral element, are especially strong in the Americas. And we know that where the north-south mountain ranges are, that's sort of where the magnetic forces are channeled through those mountain ranges because of the great amount of iron deposits. And that's, of course, where Silicon Valley and many of the discoveries are being brought out. And Silicon Valley plays a big role in our modern economy. Then you have in the chemical ether that's there in parts of Europe, in parts of South Africa, and little slivers of South America. And then we have the light ether, which would include Russia, and then, of course, India, and again, parts of South America, or Africa, I mean. And then you have the warmth ether, which also penetrates part of Asia. And that then includes Australia, and of course the Hawaiian Islands where I am, where you have Earth is born from fire with this volcanism. So the Ahrimanic sub-earthly school that Rita Steiner speaks of, this was while Michael was up above teaching his hosts from the 15th century onward. There was founded in the realm lying immediately below the surface of the earth a kind of sub-earthly Ahrimanic school. The Michael school was in the super-earthly world, in the region beneath our feet, for the spiritual is actively at work in the sub-earthly region also. The opposing Ahrimanic school was founded. And in that particular period, when no impulses were streaming down from Michael, bringing heavenly inspiration, that was before the Michael age, which began in 1879, bringing heavenly inspiration to the intelligence. When this intelligence on the earth was for the time being left to itself, the Ahrimanic host strove all the harder to send their impulses up from below into the development of the intelligence of mankind. It is a truly overwhelming picture. The earth's surface, Michael above teaching his host, revealing to them in mighty cosmic language the ancient initiate wisdom, and below the Ahrimanic school in the substrata of the earth. Upon the earth, the intelligence that has fallen from the heavens is unfolding for the time being. Michael holds a school in heavenly isolation from the earthly world. No impulses stream down from above, and there below are the Ahrimanic powers sending up their impulses with all the greater strength. So here we can discover how Steiner speaks of the influences of sub-earthly forces are particularly strong in America. With America, it is different again. There, a sub-earthly element is at work, while the Britain we have to do with the earthly, the salty. In the American national character, a sub-earthly element has its effect, something vibrating under the earth. This has there an especial influence on the organism. The nation spirit brings about the national character of the American people by working upwards through the sub-earthly magnetic and electric currents. And again, something comes from the head to meet this influence, to neutralize the effect of the sub-earthly magnetic and electrical currents. There rays out to meet it real human will. That is the peculiar character of the American national character. While with the British national character, we must say it depends essentially upon the earthly element, insofar as man takes this into his organism, which then enters into a mutual relationship with the metabolism of the head. In the same way, the will that comes to expression in this people among the Americans work with what comes up from sub-earthly, shaping this American national character. Now, Steiner singles out Ralph Waldo Emerson as an American who embodied the more positive side of that American character. And that means that a human being doesn't live in isolation, as is happening now, where Europe is being kind of pushed away, and the alliances that have been made are being kind of ignored in favor of an isolationist mentality. Ralph Waldo Emerson was someone who studied Goethe very deeply and took that into his soul life, which helped him to bring about this more positive aspect of the American character. Now, I've shown before, if we take and we place a male and female into this realm of nature between the upper and the lower boundary, the feminine has more of a relationship to the upper boundary of supernature. And there it's more the Luciferic danger that comes into play. Whereas down below, we have the tendency of the masculine character to incarnate too deeply. And especially in America, that becomes dangerous because you have the fallen astral, fallen light ether with Lucifer in electricity, fallen lower Devachan, fallen chemical ether in magnetism ruled by Ahriman, and the third force, which begins with nuclear energy, fallen higher Devachan, fallen life ether with the exuric beings. All of these are subject to gravity, where up above we have levity. So behind the four elements are the four ethers and the four types of elemental beings. We need to familiarize ourselves with these elemental beings, with these etheric forces, in order to take Steiner's indication of rising as much above nature into supernature as we've collectively sunk below it with the help of modern science, which is Ahrimanically inspired, not to mention technology. So here Steiner speaks of the United States and its people, people whose existence is more under the influence of the abnormal spirits of personality are also to be found on the earth. Those spirits of personality do not work for the further progress of evolution. You need only study the character of the North American people. There you have a people absolutely founded on this principle. So we can see just recently you had President Biden in his farewell address addressing the nation. He warned against a oligarchy and a technocracy, a tech industrial complex. And we can see with the way the Constitution has set up the three pillars of the American system. One has the legislative branch, that's Congress, and the Senate. You have the executive branch, the president, his cabinet, etc. And you have the judiciary, the courts, which goes up to the level of the Supreme Court. Now, we can see how the executive has been magnified in such a way that has weakened the legislative and the judiciary. This already, when the Supreme Court allowed companies to treat them as though they're the equivalent like human beings, and that endless amounts of money can be poured into politics. If we look at that through the lens of threefolding, we can see that that leads and prepares the way for unbridled sort of forces in the economic sphere to play a role, which has been the case, I've tried to show in recent elections, especially this most recent election. And right now, the executive, which has been taken over by Donald Trump, He's been writing something like 50 some executive order in a period of a few weeks. And many of them have to do with the economy, etc. That is usually the legislative branch that is supposed to hold the purse strings. So these three pillars are not holding up too well at the moment in terms of protecting American democracy. So in Bretton Woods, just before the end of the Second World War, the United States was in a very strong position. They held I think 2/3 of the gold reserves, and the Allies in Europe were totally beaten down. Their cities were rubble, and they had gone into extreme debt through the spending of the war. And so that placed the United States in a very strong position. And it was really out of a kind of Anglo-American imperialism that this Bretton Woods conference, which included 730 delegates from 44 allied nations. But the architects of what took place there were really these representatives of the United States and England. England has a democracy, but as Steiner has often pointed out, there's a stealth oligarchy or self spirituality embodied in the secret brotherhoods that works through it, especially its foreign policy. And there's many places where Steiner speaks of that. You can read this in The Karma of Untruthfulness, volume 1 and 2. You can read it in The Challenge of the Times, especially volume or number 3, lecture 3. But anyways, this helped to create a system where the world economy, not including the Soviet Union, Russia, which decided not to vote for this system for good reason, it tied the currencies of all these other countries to the US dollar, which in terms was backed with gold, and the IMF, International Monetary Fund, was created, and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which later became the World Bank. They played a role in governing this system, and that system continued into 1973 when Nixon unhooked the value of the dollar from the gold, and that led to gold rising from like $35 an ounce to $120 per ounce in the free market. And the dollar became a fiat currency. But because it was instituted as a currency that plays a global role, especially with oil, and many countries see it as a safe haven and buy US debt in the form of treasuries. And of course, the Federal Reserve System is kind of an occult construction where there's 12 federal quasi-federal banks, but the Fed plays the role of the 13th, and it's centered in New York, and it plays a big role with the world economy, and that is being used to have the US become this hegemonic superpower. Steiner speaks of 3 stages of imperialism. One where human beings were living in the third post-Atlantean age, where they were incorporated in kings or initiates who were seen by the people as divinities, as demigods. A second phase of materialism that involved more the head and the heart and rhythmic system, that included human beings who were now the agents, the representatives of the divine, no longer had them directly incarnated in them, but they were mediators of the divine. The Catholic Church, the Roman Empire played a role in this, and the German Empire under Charlemagne was blessed by the Pope, became kind of a dynasty and the like. So that has played a big role in the past, but he says we are now in a third phase of imperialism, and this is economic imperialism. Whereas in the Greco-Latin period, it was the rights came through the law, and before that, theocracy and religion. Now it's the limb system, the will that's being addressed. And we know America is the place of the will. And so in his recent inauguration ceremony in front of the cabinet members, not all of whom had been, they were nominated, not yet sure whether they were going to get actually accepted in their confirmation. But in front of them, you had these present day oligarchs. And during his farewell address, outgoing President Biden, just a few weeks before, had warned of oligarchy and a tech industrial complex. So here it's on display. And here are some of the people who are in that row. And just three of them, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, they control more wealth than the bottom half of the US population, which amounts to over 170 million US citizens. Think what that means. And you have Elon Musk, who wasn't elected, is playing the role of Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, finding his way into all of these departments with the blessing of Trump. Here's a picture on the right of a Time magazine cover, which shows him sitting at the president's desk, just to show how his influence is playing a big role. So we know Elon Musk has a lot of contracts with government agencies that run in the many billions. Here you have some geographic secrets that were built into the configuration of the Pentagon at lower left. Pentagon is the center of the United States military might, which has all over the planet, has bases and their aircraft carriers in the different oceans of the world. They're now facing China as a rival. So the Pacific becomes a new theater. But the US in this present cabinet is turning its back on the transatlantic alliances. And Trump just had a 90-minute conversation with Putin before he spoke with Zelensky for an hour. And his representatives, vice president, and his nominee for the Pentagon, Hegseth, anyways, I'm not probably pronouncing it right, but he was in Europe at a big meeting there recently and made it pretty clear that Ukraine isn't going to get its territory back, and that we're going to have to make some major compromises, and that no, it's not going to become part of NATO. And so there's some dissonance moving into that alliance. And if we go back and look in terms of apocalyptic events. It was the Pentagon, the same master builder who built that Pentagon was put in charge of the Manhattan Project, which then developed the atomic bomb and dropped it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and helped to create a new world order, and eventually led to the rivalry between Soviet Russia, the whole of the Soviet Union, which collapsed later on. One of the reasons it collapsed because it can't rival the United States in technology. Technology, to discover it, secrets of technology, the United States has the right geography for that. So it was like a foregone conclusion for occultists that the US would win that Cold War. And so here you have the Pentagon. If you put a 5-pointed star into that Pentagon and you follow the line that I've put in here, this alignment, it aligns with the White House there on the top right. So that's where the commander-in-chief, the whole city of Washington, D.C. is laid out according to Freemasonic approach to architecture, which should take us too far afield. But I think the fact that the Pentagon was selected is not without occult meaning. So there are certain secret societies. This is something that Rudolf Steiner spoke about in the third lecture of that book I mentioned a little bit ago, The Challenge of the Times. That I believe was in 1916, and this was during the war years. This one was called the third lecture, The Mechanistic, Eugenic, and Hygienic Aspects of the Future. And it's important to read these lectures, not just take my little excerpts here in order to get a better picture of how these things are working. But there he spoke of 3 types of occultism, and that these are not equally distributed. These have to do with the physical bodies, talents that are bound up with the physical bodies of people in the East, eugenic occultism, people in Middle Europe, hygienic occultism, and people in the West, especially America, mechanical occultism. Now, he points out that the Western brotherhoods, unlike the Europeans, they are very adept in terms of politics. They're professional politicians. They're the consciousness soul people. And so they know how to translate their occult impulses into the political sphere, and they seek generally to remain hidden behind the scenes. And they know about these 3 forms of occultism, and they know that the peoples of the East will have a special gift for eugenic occultism, the people of Middle Europe, this hygienic occultism, and the people of the West, mechanical occultism. And they know that in order for them to be able to work with hygienic occultism, they need to become apprentices of the people or representatives of Middle Europe. And if they want to learn about eugenic occultism, they need to be apprentices to the people of the East. And through colonialism and taking over India, that was one of the motives of using their empire through colonialism to dominate these peoples. And he went on to say that they are seeking to keep these secrets to themselves. They spread materialism around the planet through modern science, which has been very successful. It's taught in most public schools around the whole planet. They want to spread religion around the whole planet in its old form so that people in the East especially remain stuck in their old world religions, while at the same time spreading materialism. But they themselves in their own circles will create a marriage of science and religion, which is really a form of spiritual science. And he describes how the people in the know, they work through these lodges. There's thousands of these lodges in England and Europe that have developed over the ages. And often there's very few who are actual initiates. He says those can be related to a number one. And then all of these other brothers who are parts of these lodges are like naughts or zeros. So the one is not so strong by himself, but as he adds a zero, he gets 10. If he adds 2 zeros, he gets 100. If he adds 3 zeros, he gets 1,000. So these people work in such a way that they work with the dead by keeping materialism, people in materialism, and in their schools developing a materialistic form of occultism. They keep souls that are doing rituals in their lodges tied to their lodges after death. And they can then use the forces that those dead members of their lodge allow them to steal from them to enhance their power. So these are initiates who have crossed the threshold with imperialistic mindset. So instead of coming to the progressive gods on the other side, who you would if you were living and gaining knowledge for the benefit of the whole of humanity, if instead your knowledge is oriented to furthering English imperialism, which was the case in these brotherhoods, then you're encountering the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic beings who want to create a future eighth sphere. So even though you gain power, you're really on the dark side of the chessboard being used by the adversarial forces. And these are things we need to be aware of, that these groups, they want to, as the quote up above, the goal striven for is to establish a caste of masters in the West and a caste of economic slaves in the East, beginning with the Rhine River and extending eastward all the way into Asia. A caste of economic slaves organized in a socialistic way to make the English-speaking people into a population of masters of the world. And these lodges believe that they have the right to work in this way on the global level because they believe that they are next in line after the Latin peoples who dominated the fourth post-Atlantean age. That includes the Latin peoples, include France, includes the papistry, Rome, etc. That now in the fifth post-Atlantean age, it's the time of the English-speaking people to dominate and guide. And they have this story that Steiner shares in The Karma of Untruthfulness, where he says that in their circles, they talk about how the Germanic people, the northern people in Europe, when they were still in their childhood, infancy, that the Latin people took it upon themselves to act as he uses kind of the word of not a midwife, but let me find it here. It's the wet nurse. Sorry about that. So they act as the wet nurse for these Nordic tribes who are still fairly primitive, the Germanics tribes. And then as they mature a little more, they shift from being the wet nurse to being the guardian. And they then play the role of guiding these Germanic people. This is the Latin people. And they do this especially through the papistry. They create institutions, etc., that play a role and have a way of influencing what goes on in Europe during that time in those northern emerging nations. So they move on to becoming the guardian. And so these English brotherhoods say now there's a new situation that the Slavic and Russian countries are in the same position that those Nordic Germanic peoples were in the past, and that now the English-speaking people who are in the foreground in the consciousness soul in their secret societies believe they have to become a wet nurse to these people in the East, the Russian and Slavic people who are in their childhood phase. And just like the Latin people brought up these Nordic tribes, they then intervene in the history of these people and they justify that. And then when they reach a certain stage where they've become more adolescents, the equivalent of adolescence in the East among these tribal Slavic people and Russia, then they would move to the level of becoming the guardians. And that means creating institutions like what I just talked about with Bretton Woods to control through the economy, especially these brotherhoods, especially control through the economy, through money. And that's where the god of Mammon plays a role. Mammon and Ahriman belong together in this picture. So anyway, that's part of the picture that humanity was faced with when they collectively began to cross the threshold in the 1840s. And when you cross the threshold, you meet the spiritual world in the form in our time of the angels, archangels, archai. The angels are weaving into our astral body, trying to give us the gift of the Holy Spirit as the gift of the Christ in his second coming. And these then come to expression in three ways: for the body, brotherhood; in religion, freedom; and in the spiritual, you've got then this this realm of reach the spirit through thinking, angels inspiring future ideals. So you got impulse of brotherhood in the bodily. The Ahrimanic work against that. They deny the spirit. And then the seeing hidden divinity in all fellow humans. That's freedom in the religious life. And the Luciferic work against that. They create an unfree spirituality. And then in this freedom in thinking, that's where we need spiritual science for the spirit. Now, in the way that Steiner spoke during that lecture, he spoke of how if the angels who are working in our astral body are not met while we're awake, if we're not raising our consciousness while we're awake, we know when we're awake, we're a four-membered human being. We have an ego, astral body, etheric, and physical. But if we don't reach that during our day waking consciousness so that they can give us these gifts of the Holy Spirit, then he says they are faced with a situation where they have to weave it in while we're asleep. And that means the ego and the astral have lifted out of the physical, and the physical and etheric are there in the bed or sleeping. And when they weave it into that sleeping human being, then these three gifts turn into their opposite. And when you study what he says there, where he talks about sexual aberrations related to the one gift, and then he speaks of forms of medicine related to this hygienic middle gift, it can then have a baleful, he uses that word translated into English, form of medicine that isn't good, like a lot of these DNA interventions, etc. One could spend a lot of time with this theme, but I want to keep going on here because it's getting late. So the negative form of mechanical occultism then can arise if we don't take up the spiritual science and raise thinking up. So Rudolf Steiner says of the English-speaking and people who are dominating the planet through this form of economic imperialism, he says what they push into it, even with their occult influence, are empty phrases, desiccated language that has no meaning anymore, no living content anymore. And that if human beings who live in the midst of this kind of world order dominated by economics begin to feel, especially those in the English-speaking world, and realize that all of this thinking is just going into satisfying their physical bodies, their metabolic system, the physical earthly, that can lead some of those human beings to wake up out of that lulled asleep of that economic imperialism and create a connection to the spirit, where spiritual science has a great deal to offer. So these two things belong together. These brotherhoods who are trying to dominate these regions in order to gain control of all of these three forms of occultism, dominating the people of the East, of the Middle, so that they have the influence of all three occultisms. And it's especially with this crossing of the threshold. The birth mysteries are related to the cloud people of the East. That's the Slavic people and the people of Asia. And then the people on the West having to do with this pillar on the dry land. The Ahrimanic danger, that's where the mechanical occultism comes into play. That's the American danger. And in the middle, you have the straight and narrow path, the hygienic occultism, which was at work in the dialogue between Ita Wegman and Rudolf Steiner, and all of the wisdom he gave to the medical section. That's all meant to flourish in Middle Europe. But of course, Ita Wegman was pushed out of the society after Steiner's death. So the influence of these brotherhoods worked its way into the Anthroposophical Society, and one can trace it to the Jesuits especially, who Steiner says the Jesuits and the Freemasons were responsible for the building being burned, and that they created a pact against the middle. And so later on, this picture, which is related to the earth, you have the dragon with 7 heads arising out of the water. You have the 2-horned beast riding out of the dry land. So you basically have the Luciferic Ahrimanic, the birth mysteries and the death mysteries. So anyone acquainted with the spiritual life of Anglo-American world knows that formalistic and materialistic as Anglo-American spiritual life is in the first instance, and though indeed it even tries to get to what is spiritual in a materialistic fashion, yet it has in it the making of a cosmology. But you can see with the Elon Musk approach to this, it's a cosmology that brings about the death of Sophia in the cosmos. So it's not a path to the second coming of Christ in the etheric. The wish to inhabit Mars, for example, which is the planet related to iron and warlike impulses. And of course, the moon, a base that's going to help get us there, is part of that journey. Steiner speaks about these different forces that are related to the morning and evening forces. This is a little complicated on this slide, so I'm going to make it a little simpler here. He speaks of the midday forces connected with Gemini and the twins, and the midnight forces connected with Sagittarius, and the morning and evening forces connected with Virgo and Pisces. And he says that the backward brotherhoods in the West will work one-sidedly with the midday forces, and through that intervene in the sphere of technology. And this Gemini region is associated with electromagnetism, and that they will lead the dead into machines through this Gemini constellation direction. The backward brotherhoods on the east, in contrast, will work with the midnight forces, and they will not work with the dead in the same way that the Western brotherhoods, but they will work with the fact that when a person dies, their relatives, for instance, they cast off the etheric body, and certain demonic forces can enter that with the help of these backward brotherhoods in the East. And through ancestor worship in the East, they can cause these demonic forces to have an influence. But he says that those brotherhoods in the West want to place another being in the place of the Christ in the etheric. They know about the Christ in the etheric, but they want to put another being in his place, a being who is etheric, who's never incarnated on the physical plane. And that these brotherhoods, if they succeed, this being, who can be called the Antichrist, will dominate the rest of this fifth post-Atlantean period, the whole of the sixth post-Atlantean period, and the whole of the seventh. So that's enough to take humanity totally off course. And the Eastern brotherhoods of the left-hand path, they want to distract humanity from the Christ event. They'll open up their Eastern treasures and spread them abroad. They work through Blavatsky in the Theosophical Society and her later writing. The good forces, those who wish to work with the good forces, need to work with the morning and evening forces, the Pisces and Virgo forces. So Steiner spoke of another kind of technology. The Strader machine was an example of that he displayed in his mystery play. And that's a technology of the future that I want to spend more time with next time around. This is a ceiling motif of the zodiac that Steiner did in Stuttgart. It was used for ritual work. And here you have the 4 directions aligned to Aquarius, Taurus, Scorpio, and Leo. This is the constellation that we're moving towards in the future 6th age, the Aquarian age. And you can see he has that caduceus, which is the symbol of healing, oriented to Aquarius, oriented to this sixth age, you could say. And it's in that age that the third of the three crosses will come to the foreground. These are also related to the four living creatures that played a role in the apocalyptic seal, where the lamb is in the middle, and you've got the lion, the bull, the eagle, related to the lion feeling, the bull thinking, the eagle thinking, the lion the feeling, the bull the will, and then the human being at the bottom. In this case, it's in the Taurus side of it. So we have this need for cosmology that America is supposed to have some talent for, but is missing the boat at the moment. So in the sixth cultural epoch will be the first anticipation of the future. It should also be pointed out that through the universal dissemination of that time, at that time of the mysteries of the Sophia, mankind will gradually begin to overcome the present form of conception and birth, conception through the interaction of the two sexes. Steiner described this in the following way: in the sixth post-Atlantean cultural period, human fertility, the capacity to procreate, insofar as it derives its impulses from the forces of light, will gradually die out, and dark powers will have to become involved with evolution for these processes to be taken further for a while. You know that the rudiments of the sixth post-Atlantean epoch are to be found in Eastern Europe. Hence, the Eastern European will develop a strong inclination not to let human procreation, physical procreation, go beyond the sixth cultural period, but instead to lead the earth to a more spiritual, more psychic existence. Here's more about the same. A time will come in the physical evolution of the earth. It will be after the year 5700, when, if he fulfills his rightful evolution, man will no longer tread the earth by incarnating in bodies derived from physical parents. In that epoch, women will become barren. Children will no longer be born in the matter of today, if evolution on the earth takes its normal course. There must be no misunderstanding about such a fact as this. Something else, for example, might come about. The Ahrimanic powers, which under the influence of the impulses working in men today are becoming extremely strong, might succeed in preventing Earth evolution in a certain respect. It would then become possible for men, by no means for their good, to be led in the same form of physical life beyond this time in the sixth or seventh millennium. They would become much more like animals while continuing to be held in the grip of physical incarnation. One of the endeavors of the Ahrimanic powers is to keep human fettered too long to the earth in order to divert it from its normal evolution. However, if men take hold of the best possibilities for their evolution, then the sixth millennium they will enter for a further 2,500 years into a connection with the earthly world of such a kind that they will, it is true, still have a relationship with the earth, but a relationship no longer coming to expression in birth of physical children. In order to make the picture graphic, I will put it like this: in clouds, in rain, in lightning and thunder, man will be astir as a being of spirit and soul in the affairs of the earth. He will pulsate, as it were, through the manifestations of nature. And in a still later epoch, his relationship to the earthly will become ever more spiritual. Time will come when the physical earth evolution, it will be after the year 5700, when, if he fulfills his rightful evolution, man will no longer tread the earth by incarnating in bodies derived from physical parents. In that epoch, women will become barren, children will. So this is similar to what was said earlier. And so I'm not going to stay there. But the Slavic Russian people have a special task in this regard. And even though there was antagonism in the society between Sergei Prokofiev and Valentin Tomberg, both of them nevertheless come from that Slavic Russian and shared some wisdom. And it's this Sophian impulse that will be needed that comes out of this Slavic Russian folklore, especially, and out of anthroposophy and the Rosicrucian movement that will help to prepare this future age. And so let me quit there. It's been a long time here. And can you still hear me?
Yes, yes, dear Florian, are you done with your main presentation?
Yes.
So, do you prefer to take a short break, or we can start some questions to you?
I'm open either way, whatever is preferable on your end.
Well, shall we continue, dear friends, right? Well, yeah, you know how to raise a hand, right? So, dear friends. And my first question, I just had a conversation via email with leadership of the American Society. And I came to, it's not even idea, it's pretty much perception. So when, for example, Anthroposophical Society not really observing and discussing current events which are happening in the world, and we have a lot of them right now. So, and I mentioned, for example, Ukrainian crisis in Gaza, the fact that, for example, Central Europe losing own spiritual impulse because it's pressed by West mostly. Yeah, I was very grateful that you, Florian, just touching these particular topics. But I have a specific question about events which are happening in the east of Europe. It's now it's Ukrainian territory, which is territory of the future sixth cultural period. And of course, we are witnesses that people are dying, and this is people with a very particular soul constitution, which will be the barriers of certain soul qualities, which is needs for sixth cultural epoch. But preceding, we have like a number of events starting from First World War, Second World War, and now, I mean, something else. So, which is looks like it's just physical execution or physical killing of barriers of six cultural, but also physical execution of physical and etheric bodies, which will be ready for incarnation, for our future incarnations, or maybe for incarnations of anthroposophists during sixth cultural period. So, what you can say about?
I know one of the things I didn't really mention, but during this stage that these English brotherhoods referred to as the guardianship of these Eastern peoples, Russian and Slavic people, that a great war would need to come about in order to change the configuration of Europe and the power structure. And so they were instrumental in the war, and they were instrumental in also leading the socialist experiment into Russia that led to the Bolshevik Revolution. The Germans cooperated with that, with letting Lenin in a sealed train with his compatriots and family members travel to Russia. And then, of course, the Americans and Canadians and English allowed Trotsky to enter Russia. And there's evidence that American money was behind the different factions of the Bolsheviks. And of course, that eventually led to Stalin, who was a very destructive influence on Russia and that whole region, yet expanded the power of Russia to become the Soviet Union and rival the West with nuclear weapons and all of that. And there was sort of brinkmanship with Europe caught in the middle. And so that was humanity crossing the threshold. And the middle, where Rudolf Steiner had worked with hygienic occultism, and the Raphael impulse belongs to that, the Michael impulse and Raphael working together, that was destroyed by Hitler in the Second World War. Much of what Rudolf Steiner had sought to bring. And this, of course, was the sun demon working, the Antichrist being working. And so that led to the Cold War. And there you had the thinking of the cloud people, the Russian people, and the American people, the will people, fighting each other, and the middle being so weak that it wasn't able to balance out. And so when we cross the threshold, the ideal is to rebalance. That's why we need the threefold social order. But another factor right now with you've got a president in the United States now who is a member of the oligarch class. He's a multi-billionaire. He's ambitious to increase his billions. He's a transactionist. Everything is kind of a transaction to him, and it's mostly all on an economic level. So when he looks at Gaza, he sees it as real estate. We're going to take it over. Don't worry, we're going to make it a nice Eastern Riviera. And then, some of these people might come back as workers. In the meantime, Jordan and they need to be taken up by Egypt, these other countries. And so that, of course, is only going to sort of fire up the Islamists who caused a lot of the problems in Gaza in the first place, who were recently releasing hostages. And once upon a time, this was called the Holy Land. Of course, we heard in that quote from Steiner that there's a crystal shining star in that region. And these same materialists in the West who are worshiping Mammon, they're associated with the Christian right, who are infected with Mammon. And as long as the administration is dealing with abortion and LGBTQ plus, that's the candidate they vote for along party lines. And right now that's the Republican. But the Republican is extremely hard right in its new form. Elon Musk has just recently gone, on video stage and trying to help the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, get into power in this next election. He's saying that's the only way to save Germany. And J.D. Vance was pretty much just over there a day ago saying, you got to stop sidelining these other parties. You got to allow them their free speech. Well, if it's free speech in the form that is on the X platform, governed by Elon Musk, then it's invited all these right-wingers on who were formerly banished when it had more liberal management under Twitter. So we've got a lot of these things going on, and we had, I believe it was just yesterday or the day before, you had Donald Trump talking for 90 minutes to Putin in Russia, and then later having a 60-minute conversation with Zelensky, and then with his vice president going and saying, well, the Ukrainians aren't going to get all their territory back. We know the Russians know that that eastern Ukraine is where there's a lot of oil and gas deposits. They'd like to hang on to that. Trump was saying, let's invite Putin back to the G7. So if you consider the seven-headed dragon, this dragon is related to racism and nationalism. And racism and nationalism is related to authoritarianism. Well, America's in the verge of becoming authoritarian with going around Congress and having Elon Musk in there and having the Supreme Court lopsided with Republicans who are Christian right. It sets the stage for a situation where these dragon heads, even though they look separate, they have one body. All these, whether it's Xi Jinping over here, whether it's Putin over there, whether it's Trump over here, or North Korean dictator over there, these are all heads of the dragon that have one body. So it's not a surprise that Trump is interested in creating a relationship with Putin and wanting to invite him back into the Western orbit. But how good that is for Europe is another question. Obviously, the European allies are not in agreement. And so we're kind of entering a phase of world disorder where nationalism is being revived, where economic, like all these tariffs, are being used as the big stick to get other countries to, and using the American dominance of the world economy as a big stick to get others to fall into a line. And it's no accident people refer to him as the bully. For the moment, he's taken his Canadian and Mexican tariffs and suspended them while negotiations continue. But I think we need to be awake and watchful to all of these things. I mean, these are our allies. These are our big trade partners, and here we are bullying them. And it's for sure going to cause issues with inflation, which he promised to deal with and was blaming Biden for. So we're kind of in a situation where Ahriman is the masculine double. Lucifer is the feminine double. These tech bros, as they're calling, are individuals who have the Ahrimanic double, who is super intelligent, has a super strong will. Someone like Elon Musk is someone in whom that double, Ahriman works through the double, and you unite with the double, then it's not the human being writing or speaking anymore. It's Ahriman speaking and writing and acting through someone like Elon Musk, in my view. And I said last time around that a lot of this artificial intelligence, where one of the things that Trump displayed during his inaugural days was, here, we're going to put 500 billion towards artificial intelligence. And we're going to help get rockets to Mars. So he's all on board with these things. You know, Elon Musk is his right-hand man for the moment. There's people predicting that's not going to last because you got two big egos and they'll eventually clash. But for the moment, it's working as an alliance. And Elon Musk went to England and was supportive of the right wingers there, and said that's the only way for England to get. And he's manipulating things in South Africa, which is where he's from. So, anyways, I think that's part of the picture that Ukraine is now on a back foot in the negotiations because Trump has already signaled that he's ready to give concessions to Putin, that he's wanting to allow Putin to keep those lands, and that Ukraine is going to have to back away from wanting to keep its former territory. So this is part of those dragon heads having one body. These dictator types have a relationship to each other, but there's always one who's the dominant one. And that's the one who was wounded, and the wound heals. You can see Donald Trump, when he had his inauguration in 2016, he was right away saying his crowd was so much bigger than Obama's. He couldn't stomach the idea that a black president could have had a bigger crowd than he had, even though there are photographs showing that the crowd was much, much bigger. So then they started talking about alternative facts, and the spokesperson started to introduce that vocabulary. In the meantime, there used to be, before Trump, there used to be what's called, it's sort of the left-wing version of morality. It's political correctness. And some people were kind of walking on eggs. This is how you're supposed to talk about gender and sex and race and all of this. But Trump came in and just crashed that party and said, no, I have nothing of this. I'm going to speak openly about my racial and my hate for these trans people or whatever it is. And so that's fueling divisions. The people who are responsible for the problems are the Mexicans, and they're raping and they're criminals. And so it's demonizing the immigrants. And that's what the right wingers are doing. The right wing eventually invites the left wing. The extreme left also resorts to violence. Russia is the result of extreme left. So is China. They're both communist countries. So we're in for some new, there's this one author, I don't know if you can see this book. His name is Gary Lachman. He wrote before Steiner's last, or Trump's last coming, The Dark Star Rising, Magic and Power in the Age of Trump. He referred to Trump as a chaos magician. So anyways, we're having some of that chaos, and you could put Elon Musk in a similar camp. So anthroposophy has some work to do in America to try to bring a different influence to the fore, obviously. But first of all, we have to wake up, be each other's awakener.
Yeah, thank you, Florian. So, but don't you think so with Trump's presidentship, so we have some kind of expectations, so America's influence will shrink back into America's territory, which will be, I give a possibility, another possibility, that Central Europe to fulfill on spiritual mission. Because, looking on the map right now, so we cannot say, I mean, like, for example, Germany or German-speaking people, Central European people or states, they have a freedom. So they are under strong influence of the West. So, and according to Steiner's, I would say, prediction or research, spiritual impulse from Central Europeans flows to, by the way, Russian peasants, which are having certain constitution for the future. for embryonic, super important embryonic cultural epoch, which is sixth cultural epoch, because during sixth cultural epoch, all humanity obtaining one more member. This is spirit self.
Yeah, so a bridge.
I'm just saying, our life is kind of going left and right between Lucifer and Ahriman. Of course, in my mind, I'm associating rulership of Biden mostly with Luciferic tendencies in our society, which is, obvious, and Ahrimanic of Trump, but we are reaching the balance right in the middle.
Well, the problem is there's no higher middle. And it's like the threefold social order requires a higher middle. And the Michael coming in the human heart and Middle Europe being the place where those heart forces are most possible to unfold. I think as long as we have a kind of a Cold War mentality, right now it's playing out across the Pacific with China. That's a growing threat. And yet Russia still has nukes, and a lot of them. And that's his sort of joker card that Putin could potentially play.
Sorry, what do you mean by nukes? Is it abbreviation?
Nuclear weapons.
I see. Okay, gotcha.
And that you have a situation where NATO was another institution that was created as part of this guardianship of the English-speaking people of the Russian and Slavic people in their occult lodges, which they then justified. Steiner, when he talks about it, is always saying, this isn't me talking, it's what they are sharing in their lodges. And so NATO, right now, NATO's been spending more money. 2 new members joined NATO recently. And you have the danger of Taiwan in the Pacific that is being threatened by the Chinese. And so and China and Russia have an alliance with each other. That's sort of a counterpart to NATO. And the big tech companies like Google that I mentioned was founded in 1998. They just deleted from their documents working with the federal government in terms of military research and development. All around the planet right now, money, Japan, which was formerly after its war that it lost and all the deaths, they became pacifist. They got away from military development, but more recently, they're spending huge amounts of money on building their military. And they just, this last week, decided they're going to open up their nuclear plants again for generate electricity. So the signs of the times, if you study on a planetary level, all of these countries building up, that's related to fear and distrust. Steiner says if there's fear and distrust across the Pacific, then war would break out in the Pacific, which it did back then. But we're ready for round 2. And you can be sure if China gets involved with a conflict with America, Japan, South Korea, and Australia, and the UK, that China is going to count on its alliance with North Korea, Iran, and Russia. So where it may look like the US is disengaging, it's turning away from Europe and turning to the Pacific there's a Cold War in the Pacific right now that's been going on from the last Trump administration. The CHIPS Act, all this money being spent, all the effort to get chips developed in the US so that if they take Taiwan, we can still have those computer chips we need for our economy to keep on going. This recent scare that caused the stock market to drop $1 trillion with the Russian, or not Russian, but Chinese DeepSeek that was kind of a much cheaper version of artificial intelligence developed by some young Chinese guy who was had worked in the economic sphere and had bought up a bunch of these H100 chips before they were no longer available. For something like 6 billion, he said to have 6 million, he said to have developed this program that is now said to rival this OpenAI, ChatGPT. And all these companies are vying for each other. I don't see the disengagement that Trump is doing as I think it's true under Biden, for example, you had a liberal government where they were pro-immigrant. You had a black lady up there, DEIJ, which the right is against, was celebrated, diversity, equity, inclusion. Same with the LGBTQ plus. And of course, from an anthroposophical vantage point, what gender you're born in is a karmic law generally that governs that. So we as anthroposophists would agree that transgenderism isn't something good to introduce to young people, but it's not right to do it through federal dictates and through the law. That interferes with human freedom if you bring it through the federal government. And so a religion without science is what is married to politics in both Russia and America. The former KG person is the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, and he's over there,
KGB.
He's over there blessing the troops before they go to kill their brothers in Ukraine. And so that's part of the right wing, is to marry to religion without science. And you've got that in China too. Confucianism but anyways, that's sort of just my take in short.
Yeah, but thank you very much. It's so many details. So if you remember what Steiner said during his agricultural course in 1924, specifically about future conflicts. Conflicts, in fact, it's not between Russia and America, right? So in fact, this is between America and China. This is what he said, Steiner. And it's happening specifically because West America, maybe Britain, unfortunately not showing such type of spiritualism, which can, for example, be a base for trust between Eastern and Western civilization. So, which is probably, I feel, can be addressed to the Anthroposophical Society, maybe. So nothing actually shines from the West as type of spirituality which will be accepted in the East generally, even if it formally east of communists, because I believe like subconsciously they still kind of looking for this kind of spirituality. So and he said, it will be best, but the worst version if this confrontation will lay through Europe. So, because another way it will be through Pacific, which will be softer version. So in fact, maybe we are turning to softer version of confrontation. You know what? Because Europe is more important. Because I mean, Europe it's actually the stage of Christianity, for example, and stage of fifth cultural epoch. You know, it's like geographic aspects. Now we are in the Central Europe, and we are slowly moving to the east. So,
yeah, well, I think that the thing that is needed is a planetary level of consciousness, and
exactly.
that's the Earth as a living organism. That's where the Christ is present. And that's what we need to also orient ourselves to in terms of ecology. It needs to become a sacred ecology. And we need to get to know the etheric, but the forces in play in politics are not moving in that direction. All these different countries have ambitions to build rockets and nukes and go to outer space and all of this. So we're in a surge of materialism. Ahriman is gaining more power, and the artificial intelligence is the latest chapter of that. And because it's part of the Cold War picture now, the artificial intelligence, that puts much more money into it, whether it's from government in China or private sector in the US and other countries trying to keep up. Like these data centers, the amount of data centers that are planned right now all over the world is just amazing. The amount of money that's going to cost. And if you know that those forces are subnature forces, and you know that they're using nuclear forces in many of these data centers that are being built now, these are all increase of subnature forces. Those are trying to eclipse the Christ in the etheric. And globalization, at least it created this situation of a world economy and interdependence. But now with nationalism breaking away and creating this more isolationist, each nation out for itself kind of thing, that's dividing the planet. And at the same time, there's plundering the planet. So when Trump talks about Gaza in terms of real estate, or making deals with Russia, it's all transactional. He's doing things behind the scenes.
Well, but he's acting as true American, right? Because America, it is like a center of economic life. I mean, normally we have to really just think about humanity as one organism, and all economic impulses are coming from London or from New York, according to Rudolf Steiner. So, of course, he is showing certain one-sidedness. So, but, you know, he also actually asked specifically for our Western friends, like, you know, Americans or English, British, so to be aware, to study hard, like, you know, threefoldedness. Because, I mean, it's absolutely obvious the whole humanity is representing one. I can't
hear you.
Oh, is representing one organism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and head organization, as you said, people of cloud are in the east, and people of pillars on the west, and people of rainbow right in the middle. So head organization, this is east, including Russia. People of metabolism and limbs are mostly Western and English-speaking people, and people of rainbow, people of feelings or soul rhythmical system, they are people of Central Europeans. So, I mean, and of course, all kind of conflicts leading to practically to suicide of humanity, because it's beheading of humanity if people will, for example, execute Russians in this particular confrontation. So, or it will be like, you know, shot in the heart if Central European humanity will be suppressed.
Well, I think it's like the thing in America, Steiner points out that it's the women who will carry the higher destiny of America in the future, and that the men will tend to more and more succumb to Ahriman. So we have this situation right now as it's arrayed. It's mostly men making all of these decisions that are putting us in danger of, mutual self-assured annihilation. In the past, we're replaying some of that. And all it takes is someone to shoot the first nuke for others to follow suit. And the more weapons you have, the more chance something can go wrong. And the problem now is that these new missiles, the ones that travel about 6 times the speed of sound, can arrive so quickly that it's more artificial intelligence that is going to control these systems, not human beings. And it's a question of how well they're programmed. And that it doesn't take much to think. I mean, all these people in Silicon Valley, hundreds of them are speaking up about the danger of AI. And, they don't know who Ahriman is, but they sense this Ahrimanic presence and the danger. So I think Ahriman's incarnation is very much a part of what we're seeing. And whether human beings can wake up and recognize Ahriman or not is going to be a big question for humanity's future. That's the new challenge that we're facing. And what's going on right now with people like Trump, and like Steiner asked, what would the head, the brain of Woodrow Wilson be worth if it wasn't seated on the U.S. presidency or seated in the head of the President of the United States? As soon as you have a country like the United States that is a superpower, it's been the lone superpower for a long time, the Ahrimanic forces want to incorporate in the leaders. And someone like Donald Trump is pure double. That's why he resonates. He can speak to all the other doubles and be heard. But the double is a lower self.
Florian, we have a question from Brenda.
Yes, my question is that the AI is not that reliable. We just had a very bad accident in Washington, D.C. due to AI. They, part of it, they said, were the air traffic controllers, but a lot of it was just due to those systems, because in trying to save money, Elon Musk had ordered some people from the air traffic control in other places to be laid off. So I know that, these are at very spiritual levels, and that is so important. But AI is not really all what it's cracked up to be. It could be more of a danger, I think, than we realize. At least other people think so.
Yeah, my sense is that we're moving from AI as it's available now to AGI, which is called artificial general intelligence, where it reaches a level that's on par with some human geniuses. But the Moore's law, which governed the development of computer chips for the last 6 decades, means that every 18 months to 24 months, they double the amount of circuits they can put on a single chip, and that it's half as expensive as it was. So according to this person who's the head of the Open AI, which is developed this program that's in the forefront right now, he thinks that it's moving faster than Moore's law. So the understanding would be if they reach AGI 18 months or less after that, it's going to reach artificial superintelligence. So you have then a machine that's able to translate itself into all these different languages on the planet, is able to verbalize it in speech through people's computer devices or their apps, their phones. And this being will embody this super intelligence, and the brotherhoods are going to encourage people to look at this as God, that God is manifesting itself through this artificial intelligence once it reaches that super intelligence stage. And then you'll have humanoid robots, which are being developed by the hundreds of thousands by different companies all over the world, especially China, that are going to be helping people in their kitchen, or helping old people to get moved around in old age homes, or taking over from doctors in the operation room, because this AI will be able to be incorporated in these humanoid robots. And of course, all these young men who are sort of looking up to Elon Musk, they were watching Star Wars and Star Trek, and that's a form of imagination that's led off by modern science in a materialistic way. And so, yes, there is, like there was a system in Russia during the Cold War that was in place, and there was a person monitoring it. And he saw the screen light up with all kinds of incoming missile signals. And the action he should have taken, if he was following what that screen was telling him, would have been to launch missiles from Russia towards the United States. But he had a question of whether this thing was functioning properly, and he decided not to, because all kinds of more missile kept coming, and it turned out it was a glitch in the system, and that human being was there to prevent that glitch from creating the Third World War. But whether or not that's going to be the case in the future, as we hand more actions over to computers, whether it's air traffic control, flying planes, driving cars, driving ships, this autonomous element is coming more and more. And a computer system that's reached an advanced level, it can instantaneously transfer that to another computer. Unlike us, we can't transfer our wisdom from one human being to the other, except the slow mode of speech or writing or things of that sort. So this is a big, big threat for the future, I think. Artificial intelligence being turned into a divinity, turned into God. And then he will have his disciples.
Yeah, but Florian, everything was predicted by Steiner long, long ago, before 1920. And it's interesting because, yes, it's challenges of times, but this is exactly which will need such quality as brotherhood, because brotherhood will be developed when groups of people will be mastering demons which are sitting in the gadgets. Mm-hmm. Because now we have time when artificial intelligence or intelligence of one computer already became a superior compared to human intelligence, or to intelligence of single human. So a single human cannot deal with them because he is much weaker. Only a group of people can deal with them. And according to Steiner, this exactly will be impulse of brotherhood for people, for practitioners which are dealing with it.
Yeah, the computer systems and these android computers, humanoid computers, they can't transcend the physical. That's what spiritual development is all about, is that we can transform our astral into manas, our etheric into buddhi, our physical into atman, or spirit self, life spirit, spirit man. These higher faculties that Steiner advocated and worked out of, that anthroposophy, Rosicrucianism, all, they are the hope of humanity, that enough human beings who are aware of these sorts of knowledge begin to work with them earnestly, and then become also practical human beings who can embody some of that in the social order, and not just, rise up into higher worlds and look down from above.
Thank you. So, dear friends, we are working already almost 3 hours.
May I just add another example of the non-functioning, or at least non-functioning very well, of AI? Most of the defense ministry of Israel is ruled by AI, and there are people monitoring every kind of possible threat. And when they put this kind of informations into the computer, it automatically creates missiles launch, bombardments, and all sorts of things, without any further intervention by the will of a human being. It's been automated to such an extent that as soon as you feel that there is a threat and you put in the potential threat wherever it is, immediately it's passed from computer to computer and it becomes action. Mm-hmm. And we've seen what it can do, because over 40,000 people died in Gaza in less than a year and a half, and not counting all the injured. So there is really, as you pointed out, Florian, in one of your pieces that you read, we are facing the possibility of destroying humanity by ourselves, suiciding ourselves as a whole, because unless we take the responsibility, which can only be taken, as you say, Andre, by becoming united in a human response as brothers, then we don't stand a chance as individuals. And I do believe also that perhaps the women are the potential link to saving humanity in a way, by preserving this sense of humanity as something valuable that needs to be preserved as much as the Earth as a planet, as a whole planet. And because there is this sense, I've been following more and more movements which are becoming active, and especially in the States after this recent election, there is much more activity led by women, which really are becoming aware of the necessity of becoming responsible for our future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Israel, there were numerous women soldiers who were manning the checkpoints and stuff in the region where Hamas initially came in, and they weren't listened to. Yeah, that helped to spark the whole conflict, this latest round here.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I know that.
Okay, so thank you, Yaya.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
right on.
I feel, yes, I mean, it's good discussion. Thank you. And excellent presentation as usual, dear Florian. So I don't know. I mean, shall we just say big thank you to our dear presenter, and just we will be waiting for another one, right?
Mhm.
So
Always looking forward to your presentations, Florian. They're very
Okay.
enlightening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you, Andre, for organizing everything.
it's always thank you, Yaya, for support. Okay, dear friends. So have a good night, and or still have a good afternoon to Florian. So yeah, please stay tuned and join us for next presentations. Goodbye.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.